And we're gone. We're on there. Yay. Okay. Hi, this is the Ennovation Center. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a GoTo Biz Pro Peers and Resources Facebook Live series that we're doing. I'm here with Joyce Hrinya. I knew I'd do that. Her name, Hrinya. We were just having that discussion just as we were coming on. We're going to talk to you today about food, most particularly food manufacturing, understanding where and how to position your company within that, and learning some of the actually new trends. And we're going to discuss some tips of the business on direct marketing too. And thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, really happy to be here.
And so Joyce has a company called Acquire Retain, and is an expert in the food industry, and I really enjoy working with her at the Ennovation Center. The reason we started our GoTo Biz Pros and Peers series on our Facebook Live series is because we get at the Ennovation Center about 700 calls a year. How do I start a business? There's terrific resources throughout the Kansas City region for that. It's just a little overwhelming at times. So we started this series to introduce terrific resources to the not only the Kansas City area but to the world, to let them know who we are and as a region, and how we can help businesses grow. And so this is Facebook Live, obviously, since I bungled the first part of it. But also, if you are joining us live, please do, you can send us questions on our Facebook. If you hear a voice that comes across, that's Sander Winkle. He's our producer, and so if he's got a question that comes through from an audience, then he'll ask that question. And so again, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We are looking forward to this conversation about food and all around food manufacturing and food products. But whether you're food or whether you're another type of business, that really at the baseline of it, there's a lot of things that are similar no matter what type of business you're in if you're selling a product. And you've got expertise, whether it's food or whether it's a consumer-based product, you've got expertise across the board. So again, thank you.
Absolutely happy to be here, and I really feel like, do you want to talk about some of the products that are in front of us here and where they came from?
Oh, sure. Well, so I just want to say it's the holiday season, and I just wanted to thank some of the clients at the Ennovation Center. These are all products that are from the Ennovation Center that are manufactured in the kitchen here. So
Yep.
Thank you for pointing that out. And so that's why it's here. It's the holiday season, so we just wanted to feature these clients. And because a lot of what we've discussed is your expertise in food, we just wanted to show off that there's a diverse group here too. So
Right.
this is about a third of the products that are manufactured here by micro enterprise. I mean, they're startup companies. They start out with, I've got an idea, I've got a product I really want to share. We'll talk about this a little later. Rarely do they ask the question, I want to start a food manufacturing business, how do I do that? Usually it's, I've got a product.
Right. Or a wonderful recipe, or something that my grandma used to make that I'm passionate about, that I want to share with the world.
That's exact. I want to share it. So so we've got pickles here, and these are terrific. These are dragonfly pickles. But as we talk about each of these products, it's a competition.
Yes.
It's a race to market.
Yes, it is.
And so what are some of the challenges when a company is looking at just starting up, thinking about, okay, where am I going to be? You've had experience at a global level. So when we talk about that versus the micro enterprise that's like, I just want people to taste my product. What are some of the core things that they need to think about as they're going into that business?
Well, I think one of the most important things is the branding of the product and the company.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is because mainline food companies, whether it's Campbell Soup or General Mills, are really, really challenged to have the kind of micro innovation that's critically important to consumers today.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is that a lot of micro enterprises aren't really very big before they're being acquired by these incredibly large food companies who are just critically starved for innovation. One example of that is one of my favorites, Crave Jerky, which was acquired a couple years ago by the Hershey Company, who desperately needed a protein in their product portfolio.
Chocolate and protein. Got it.
Chocolate and protein. some really interesting, flavor combinations in Crave's portfolio, and there you go. Hershey was happy to buy that company. So going back to branding, that's the critical part that I believe micro companies can really work on and create. What is the absolute only special thing about your product, or as you mentioned, you could think about it from a service context as well. So I always ask my clients and companies that I provide consulting services for, what is the only thing that your product does from a features and benefits perspective for a certain target market that no other company does right now? And that is a really, really hard question, Lee.
When you think about that, it really is, because you're talking about, you're walking through, so as we're talking to companies and they're looking at what's my relevancy in the marketplace, and they're walking through stores that are lined with granola, or that are lined with seasoned nuts, or some of the other things that are in here. You have to look at that and say, what's my differentiator? And what problem am I solving for the consumer that they can't get out of any of these others that are on here? And so that could be a very daunting, once you start digging into that without someone to help walk through with you, that could be a very daunting conversation with yourself.
And one of the key parts of that is it often comes out of the founder's passion. So if you think about some of the really successful exits for food companies in the last 3 to 4 years, one that really stands up above the fray is Vega. And Vega was a protein powder that was created based on the founder's need in his triathlon training regimen for the highest protein products with the lowest caloric intake. He was really looking for that balance. And he kept going out into the marketplace and looking and seeking that unique combination of protein that was going to really drive his performance in his workouts. And he couldn't find it. And he had to create it himself. And that passion that he had for training and doing triathlons and having protein that would really fuel his workouts to the next level of performance is really what created Vega. So I think in thinking about branding, having the founder's passion, come into the forefront of the conversation and be a huge part of it is unbelievably critical. Because that's the only way. Their passion, in many ways, is the only differentiating element in some cases. But where does that passion come from? Where does that drive materialize? What got them going on this journey? And I think it is a journey to really build a brand. And think about that only statement. So only, 4 little letters that are really, really hard. One of the things that we're going to do in my session of the Ennovation Kitchen classes is really work on that. And folks are going to have to really spend time and effort working through their only statement, which is often called a brand positioning or differentiation exercise. But it really pushes you, and when you have other people that care about you, that are passionate similarly about your idea, they can be extraordinarily helpful in that process. So don't be shy to reach out to people that you love and trust, that know what you're trying to do, and ask their advice. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for food companies is you often say to yourself or your friends, you just have to taste it. It's so good. And one of the challenges when you think about distribution and how you're going to be able to see your product is that sampling isn't always the first thing that's available, right?
Right. It's a good entree into it, but having somebody taste it is not necessarily that's not going to be the everyday consumer that's either walking by it in the aisles or experiencing it in on direct or online. They're not going to get that opportunity. So that's exactly right.
And that's where the branding piece, starts again in terms of the essence of what you're talking about and what's differentiating about your product, because then that helps with every marketing tactic that you're going to move forward with. The most important of which in many food products is the package. Right. So when you think about that package design and how you're going to tell you know, either yourself or your friend who's helping you with the package design, what is your branding? How should it be represented? And it's far, far more important than, you know, issues like what is the font and what is the color palette, which often a lot of people talk about as part of your marketing exercise. Your brand is so much more. Your brand is the way that people should answer emails from your company. Your brand is the way that if you picked up the phone, you answer in your brand voice, you know, and so your brand has got to be about the absolute essence of what is differentiating your product in the marketplace. And I think it comes from your passion.
And so along with that passion, you know, that's a really good point, because that's why you have an email address that is a professional email address, not attached to just one of the general email servers. That's why if you are going to use your cell phone, the message on the cell phone is not, hey, it's this is my brand and this is who I am. Mine doesn't say hey, by the way, but it's you know, so you're really staying in and true to that product all the way through, or that brand all the way through, because a brand could be a suite of products, but it's a brand. And so, and as we talk about that, that's so critical. And we have seen clients that when they start out, they have an iteration of packaging because they're going to market. And usually we'll go through 4 iterations of packaging before they really get to that really streamlined, polished, I've got this, you'll recognize it when you see it in the store type of look. And we see clients that have spent so much money on that packaging and that labeling because of brand changing through that process, that, as you pointed out, if you've got that information up front, or you've got that in line and you spend a little time with it, granted you're learning your marketplace as you're growing, and you know, that's good, you're bootstrapping, but that could save a lot of time and especially a lot of time and money, because we've seen people, and even your packaging, understanding how you can be more efficient in packaging. We were having a conversation earlier about the importance of packaging and efficiencies when you're doing direct online sales.
Absolutely. And one of the ideas that's might seem small to you, just listening to this conversation, is how much density and air you have in your package. And you might say, well, why would that ever be important? Well, what's interesting is no matter if you're shipping it yourself or working with someone else to do your fulfillment and distribution, like Amazon FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon, they're very concerned about the density of package size because it contributes to additional cost for shipping. And one of the things to think about when designing your package is how much density you can reduce. The other way to say it is how much air you can take out of the package, so that you can make it as flat as possible for shipping. Because one of the other things, after your branding is established, and of course you've done all the right things that you guys help people do from a health and safety and standardization of ingredient perspective, is to truly start to work on the realities of omnichannel distribution. And when I say omnichannel, it simply means the customer, who we all know is going to love your product, wants to be able to buy it wherever he or she wants to buy it. If I want to buy it on my phone through Amazon, I need to have it there. If I want to buy it through your website, I need to have it there. If I want to have it on my grocery store shelves, I need to have it there. And so it's really, sometimes sounds like a fairly fancy term, but it only means that the customer has a seamless shopping experience in terms of being able to access your product whenever, wherever they want.
Because there's a lot of competition. It circles back around to the only. Because there's a lot of competition in the marketplace, and you want to stay relevant to your consumer. You want to stay relevant to that market.
Well, and it also, the part of that relevancy and that branding really comes into, you know, a word that's often overused, of value. And value, you know, if you have too much, you know, cost in your product, you know, in order to get to a decent margin structure, you might actually put you know, a higher retail price point on your product than the market calls for.
Right.
And that's why being very consistent in your approach to adding cost as you're creating your product, the ingredients in your product, the packaging of your product, the distribution channel for your product, every place where you can take cost out that is not affecting your brand or the value you're trying to create in the marketplace really needs to be considered. If it's going to cost you an extra X cents to have more air in this package, I would argue that the consumer doesn't want to buy much air, and you need to think about, you know, the vacuum sealing or whatever approach makes sense no matter where you're going to sell your product. But it's those little details that kind of contribute to the value that you bring to the brand that you've created with your only statement. Absolutely.
It'll be interesting what happens when we talk about that density and potato chips. We all think about the bag that we get and the air that's in, and then all at once you've got chips. So it'll be interesting to see from a food dynamic what happens when we talk about those types of things that could affect or reflect. So I don't know. I just one of those things. There are so many different parts and pieces of starting and managing and scaling a food-based business, and I so appreciate Joyce, that you're part of the Innovation Kitchen Classroom. You mentioned it earlier. In January we're starting a new venue, and it is available not only to people that are in the Innovation Center as our shared kitchen, but really across the Midwest region, whether you're Missouri or Kansas. But the Innovation, I'm holding this up because if you go online, you're going to see the carrots, but you're also going to see the classwork, the coursework. And so branding, brand position, understanding your only statement, your statement about your product and what your differentiator is one of the terrific things that we're going to be discussing during that classroom. That's going to be a 12-week class. The first 2 weeks are going to be one-to-one work, and then it's going to be 3 hours once a week for the next 10 weeks. It will culminate with a buyer's event, so I'm kind of excited about that, because as companies come through, we want to make sure your testing is done up front. And your labeling is started, so that at the end of that 12 weeks, you've got a product that could actually be direct to consumer, sold online, and sold in the stores. So it's designed to accelerate companies. It's designed to accelerate business, and all of the foibles that go into owning and operating and building a food product company, hopefully we're addressing in there. So we've tried to, with your help and with others, we've looked at what are the core elements, the hardcore elements, and so it's called the RU Basics, but it's not so basic a course.
I think it's going to actually have a lot of extraordinarily important information to avoiding the mistakes that a lot of folks do. Can be very costly. And streamlining the process as much as possible is extraordinarily important, and I think the class is really going to help do that.
Well, and I love that you're bringing, because of your background as interim CEO and marketing director, and the national marketing campaigns that you've put together for products, having a perspective as part of the course of what's going on nationally in distribution and how food companies are moving. And because, you know, just if we think about just raw product alone, organics and fresh goods, sustainable, that's a $4 billion industry. That's one core small piece of what we see every day in the food industry. So we go from micro enterprise to looking at a regional product, growing to a Midwestern product, to a national scale and an international. Those are huge steps to take as an entrepreneur. So I appreciate that you're going to join us for that, and then you're going to guide us through that those steps for that and provide your insight. So thank you very much for that.
No, I'm really excited to do it. I think anything you can do to help people minimize mistakes at the early stage, incredibly helpful to the scale-up process that you mentioned. And I think, quite frankly, too few startups actually end up being in the scale-up phase because they don't necessarily have the benefit of this sort of education. And when you make a mistake, and it can be really costly, sometimes, you know, businesses, you know, sadly have to fold at that point.
Yeah.
And all of that passion and all of that care and concern that was put in really don't move forward, and that should be minimized.
Yes, yes, and that's another intention. It's not just about helping business grow; it's also helping that that business owner understand really where their passion lies and why it does, and how they can consistently move their company forward as they choose to. Not everyone defines success the same way.
Right.
And so that's a key piece of it too. It's how you define that success, what you want out of that business and that product as you go forward, to be able to make it a household name. So I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today too. So that's great.
Absolutely. And happy holidays to everybody. Hope we have a restful and peaceful few days.
That's right.
To think about our families and friends and life, and get recharged and ready for 2018.
I know, it's around the corner.
I know.
What happened? So thank you to our audience today. We really appreciate it, and you can connect with Joyce. Her company is Acquire Retain. You can connect with us at Ennovation.kitchen. She's featured on as part of the classroom. And we so appreciate, again, the time and attention you've provided, and happy holidays and happy new year to everyone. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time for the GoTo Biz Pros.